Do you ever find yourself hitting a skill wall and feeling like you wish of a way on how to break through that wall? But every time you sit down and try to think of new strategies, your mind comes up blank. You have trouble even knowing where to start. You try to get coaching from someone or maybe look up some Twitch streams or YouTube guides, but there are many missing answers to questions that the creators themselves didn't even know how to ask. They're prescribing these specific build orders, but you don't even understand how and why they got there. You can somewhat copy them, but you don't understand what you're supposed to be doing most of the game. In this video, I'm aiming to give you a way of thinking and building game plans that are usable for beginners, seasoned players, or anyone struggling with plateauing. I'm going to teach you a process of creating your own strategy in a few simple steps. You can then apply those to any games, be they an RTS game, deck building game, or any other strategy game. I'm not going to be getting too deep into counter strategies or building out entire tournament-ready strategical approaches with webs of interlacing reactions and adaptations. That would make for a much longer video and a much more complicated video at that. I'm also not going to be getting too deep into general improvement techniques, though I do think that's interesting to talk about. It would again make the video much longer, and I'm not going to have time for that today. Though let me know if that's something you're interested in. So what is a strategy? A strategy is a game plan that rallies around a certain victory condition and which outlines the steps on how to get there. Improving your strategy making process can have a positive impact on your skill, which will have a positive impact on your MMR or on your enjoyment of the game. There are many different skills that comprise your total level in playing an online multiplayer game or even a single player game, and making strategies is just one of those skills. So even if you improve your process of creating your own strategies, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll directly go up in level, but you could have a lot more fun playing the game anyway. So when we talk about creating a strategy, a complete strategy, it is generally comprised of the following cornerstones. Step 1, you're going to have an opening, like a build order in an RTS. This build order or this opening will have a level of quality, efficiency, and adaptability, possibly with branching out strategical choices based on information you're getting. And they will also cover the 3 major cornerstones of strategy gaming, which is aggression, safety, and greed, or threat, safety, and greed. These cornerstones relate with each other in the following way. Aggression beats greed, greed beats safety, and safety beats aggression. All of this is comprised in the opening of your build, and we'll be talking more about that later. The second step of making a strategy will be to have a skeleton plan of the entire game plan that you're going to be having, not counting any information you might be gathering or how you're going to be adapting or reacting to that information. It is, if my opponent plays in a relatively average and predictable way, then my average and predictable strategy and game plan and the entire process of the game is going to look roughly like this. That is the skeletal body that you're beginning with. What you would be doing in the average situation. Step 3 is information gathering, also called scouting. After you open with your opener, you will start getting some information about what the opponent is doing. The first contact you make with your opponent, be it militarily or based on reconnaissance, you will get some information and you will then make an estimation whether you should stick to the skeletal plan or make a change and deviate in some way. The better you plan these steps, the more readily able you will be to make a decision whether it's worth deviating from your main strategy or not, but more about that later. Step 4 is going to be reacting appropriately to that information or not reacting in case you deem that your standard is sufficient for what's happening. Step 5 is going to be utilizing any power spikes you might have and punishing any power valleys an opponent might have. 6 will be understanding your win condition and visualizing your victory and then pursuing that. And the final step, 7, is claiming the win and getting the win and making your opponent concede defeat. So let's talk about choosing a victory condition, and we'll take an example game of Civilization 6. Most of the following examples will after that be for Warcraft 3. All strategy creation, the first step you make when you're looking to make a strategy is actually starting with step 6 of the 7 that I just talked about. Step 6 is understanding your win condition and visualizing your victory. So basically, you should always start by that and deciding on one of the different victory conditions that you would like to pursue. In some games, victory conditions are pretty clearly outlined, such as in Civilization 6. You can have a military win condition, a science win condition, and more. So let's say, for instance, we decide to pursue a science victory by completing the space race and colonizing Mars. So now we understand our victory condition. We need science points and we're going to colonize Mars, and that's it. Once you do that, you will actually just win. That's the full win condition. So in order to claim the win, you need to follow steps 1 through 5. So how do you do your opener? How do you get information? Do you adapt, etc.? How do you build your civilization so that it will be conducive to building and obtaining a science victory? So you start out by doing your regular optimized expansion strategy, deciding how many settlers you want, how many cities you're going to be settling, in how many turns, for turn 1 to 50, etc. Your game plan is generally non-militaristic, but you still need to have enough military to resist certain aggressions by the neutral barbarians and by other factions as well. But it is not your main goal. Your main goal is to get as many science points as possible. You're going to be trying to attract great scientists and engineers in order to boost your space project and scientific output. And you'll need good production as well so that you can build spaceports, etc. So while you're trying to win, you need to find out also what win conditions opponents are chasing so that you can disrupt them from reaching those win conditions. And you'll need to make a judgment how much you're willing to sacrifice away from the general optimization of maximizing your science output. How much are you willing to sacrifice from that standard optimized path? There's 2 possible outcomes basically. Answer number 1 is, can you outrace them? If you can already outrace someone, there's no need to disrupt them. Simply achieve your victory condition sooner than they achieve theirs. If you can't outrace them, you'll try to sacrifice as much as is needed, even at the cost of delaying yourself. So long as you disrupt an opponent with a greater measure than you've disrupted yourself by deviating and sacrificing a little bit in order to disrupt them. You may have a less optimal and smooth road to victory, but their road is even more less optimal. The main principal point is that you'll either pursue your own win con as fast as possible, or you'll sacrifice time and efficiency to disrupt them. This is basically a conundrum that is at the heart of every strategy game and every strategy that you'll be building. Now when we get to Warcraft 3 victory conditions, things are a little bit more complicated and a bit harder to understand, as while there is one concise victory condition, as opposed to Civilization 6's many, it is a somewhat elusive and hypothetical victory condition. The true legal victory condition in WC3, in Warcraft 3, is eliminate all buildings. This is the actual win condition, right? But it almost never gets there. As you probably know, RTS players routinely call GG and tap out before the actual defeat screen is served, in over 99% of the cases. We're quitters! But in all seriousness, defeating an opponent sufficiently and thoroughly beyond any chance of comeback and redemption is what constitutes and will lead to a victory. Warcraft 3 has 4 asymmetrically designed and balanced races. Humans are very good at fast expanding because they can set multiple peasants to work on a certain building, including a town hall. So they'll do that better than anyone else. Undeads have amazing nuking power. They can't call a nuke on the enemy base, but this is the metaphor we use for when they use Coil and Nova to inflict a lot of spell damage on a single target, be it a hero or a unit. Elves are the master of multitasking, whereas orcs are an aggressive race of base raiders. Besides picking your race, you can leverage a large variety of different strategies and advantages in the game. Part of creating a strategy that will lead to victory is to try and exploit one of the multiple advantages to the maximum, and I'm about to give you a list. So let's talk about the types of advantages that a player can have in a game of Warcraft 3. Then we'll pick a few of those advantages and then rally a strategy around it. This is my process. So the types of advantages one can have are economic advantage. Economic advantage means getting more gold than an opponent. This can materialize in several different ways. The most obvious one is where you obtain an extra gold mine and you'll have 2 bases, whereas the opponent may only have 1 base. You can also sell items via killing creeps, which means that creeping can also be a part of a gold enhancement strategy. You can also get more gold by staying in a lower upkeep than an opponent. So running a large standing army will cost you money. So part of a economic advantage playstyle might be to never go over 50 for a very long time before finally doing it when you have a certain bank saved up. The second advantage you can have is hero advantage. Hero advantage may look like something like having higher hero levels, which is obtained through killing creeps as well as killing enemy units. If you kill more of their units than they kill of yours, and if you kill more creeps, then you're gonna have higher hero levels. This can be a win condition on itself as well. Better heroes can also constitute having smarter hero picks or more greedy hero picks. For instance, the Farseer is a very good early game hero, but it doesn't scale as well into the late game. If you're playing against an Orc player that has a Farseer, merely aiming for survival is actually a valid win condition, because the Farseer level 5 is generally less valuable than something like a Pandaren Brewmaster level 5. So if you're facing a Farseer Shadow and you're Demon Panda, and we're talking about the triple cornerstone of strategy pillars in strategy games: greed, aggression, and safety. And if you're the Demon Panda guy, then of course you should be playing around safety, because you've already encapsulated greed within the Demon Panda choice as they scale better into the late game. So Demon Panda are better heroes than Farseer Shadow in that eventually they'll win. So Farseer Shadow will need to leverage an earlier advantage. So your power spike as Farseer Shadow might be early game when they're level 1, 2, and 3, whereas Demon Panda might have a power spike at level 3, 4, 5. This will help dictate your decision making as you're deciding to go with a certain advantage. But I'm getting too deep into this, let's go to the next advantage. Third advantage, item advantage, such as consumables and permanent items. Permanent items and consumable items are both found from creeps, so again, creeping can be a very valuable thing to obtain throughout all the games of Warcraft 3 that you'll be playing. You can also go for an army size advantage, which is usually obtained through either killing more of your opponent units or by having more gold, which will then translate to army advantage. The fifth one is army quality advantage, which is obtained from good decision making. For instance, if you're building a Chimera army when the opponent has an army of abominations, then you have an army quality advantage. Having 5 Taurens would also be an army quality advantage over an opponent having 7, 8 Grunts. They're both kind of the same unit in that they're a heavy armor melee unit from Orc race, but the Tauren is more advanced and it therefore has more quality. It has more damage output and more tankiness for its cast. Army quality advantage is also coming out of having superior blacksmith or war mill upgrades. Having more upgrades will of course cost money and planning, and so again you get to the requirement of needing more gold in order to leverage this advantage of army quality. But it is totally possible to aim for an army quality advantage through getting more upgrades. You might be running a mirror matchup where you're both Night Elf, but you'll start investing in upgrades early, and therefore he can't catch up anymore, and that could be something that wins you the game. There's also the movement speed advantage, which actually allows you a great deal of decision making. So if you are faster with your army and your heroes, then you're actually able to decide when you're going to be taking a fight. As if there's a bad fight timing, you can run away from it, but if there's a good fight timing, you can chase them down, hunt them down, and take the map control. So trying to build a very fast army can lead to certain advantage of being judicious with which fights you want to be taking. It also gives you a chance to take more risks, to creep aggressively but get away from threats, and to base trade more effectively. Base trade meaning where you are threatening their home base with attacks, and then when they come to defend, you leave again, and thus you pin them in their base as you hover that threat over them. And it'll be hard for them to do the same thing to you because you move faster. So every time they go for your base, you'll hit theirs first. Another advantage you can have is having a more defensible or fortified base. Sometimes this requires investments, sometimes it's just the nature of things with races. Naturally, Undead has a better defended base than human, since slow towers are a very strong form of defense, and therefore Undead usually has more freedom to leave their base, knowing that their base is safe, whereas humans always need to remember that they may have to defend their base. And finally, you can have a better purpose-driven army. So it's not necessarily better, it's not necessarily larger, it may not necessarily win a straight-up fight, but it might serve a very specific purpose. An example here would be an army of Bat Riders, which would have the purpose of killing buildings very well, an army of Raiders, which would have the purpose of killing buildings or heroes very well, as you can ensnare them and net them in place. Or it could be an army of Ghouls and Destroyers, which would be very good at killing peasants very quickly and then running away as well, as one is a flyer and the other is very fast. Having a purpose-driven army can totally be a tool in the cabinet of you coming out with a certain strategy choice and a win condition. So when we're choosing to craft our own strategy, I'm not here just teaching you, here's a cool build, go ahead and try this Moss Headhunter build, right? Because that's something you can already find in guides out there from me or from anyone. I'm trying to teach you how to make your own strategy. So take one of these 8 advantages and then pick one of them, and then we start building a strategy around it in a few certain simple steps. We can do this by asking ourselves a series of logical questions. And throughout all of our decisions, our strategy creating decisions, keep in mind the 3 triple cornerstones of playstyles and strategy games, which is greed, aggression, and safety. Alright, I'm going to share 3 examples where we pick a strategy. They're going to be covering self-standing examples of strategy choices. Basically, consider your main strategy choice and win condition as if it were an oak tree. This is how I always thought of it. The oak tree is my main strategy, and every secondary branch and arm is a major departure from reaching the summit and the crown. These branching out arms represent major deviation responses based on intel that you'll be gathering and receiving. You'll try to analyze when you're no longer able to continue on the present course of the main trunk of the oak tree in what I like to call the map hack response. So what is the map hack response? Despite its controversial term usage, I like to think of it as follows. If I had map hack at any point in the game or at all points in the game, and I would be able to know what I would be able to know with it, and I could see what I would be able to see with it, what would then be my optimal response? This question line is usually done in a replay or after a game. So for instance, you just lose to a thing, let's call it the thing, and the thing materialized at 8 minutes. That's when we saw it, but he actually started building the building blocks for it at 5 minutes. So if I were a map hacker, then at 5 minutes I could start seeing the signs. And then my main strategy tree of mass abominations, let's say, right? I'm gonna go mass abominations, but at 5 minutes I saw Chimera Roost. Then Chimeras beat abominations, right? So then if I had a map hack, at 5 minutes I would stop the plan of abominations, and then what would I do? So it can really help when you have a strategy to build these secondary arms and to remember what threatens it, and then to try and come up with when those threats start materializing and start showing itself, and then you start creating scout timings. I'll scout at minute 5, I'll scout at minute 7, in order to identify when those things are happening, and then it's worth deviating. And when we scout and we see those things aren't happening, or if we forget to scout, well then we don't deviate, because we have our standard plan. So there's always a standard plan, and then there's deviations for things that are worth deviating for. My map hack response when I have abominations and I scout Chimera Roost would be to unsummon one of my 2 slaughterhouses, to cease abomination production, to go to my graveyard and cancel any abomination upgrades that I might have going. I'll start making destroyers for my slaughterhouse instead, and I'll start reutilizing my crypt to make fiends or gargoyles, or maybe I'll build a boneyard to start making frostworms. All of these are going to be doing well against Chimera, and they're all worthy deviations and departures from the main tree, and they go into another branch. If we don't have secondary branches to our tree, we're not really engaging in picking and doing a strategy. We're just kind of in blind pursuit of this one thing as some kind of meme. I'm not going to go too deep into counter strategies, but I believe secondary branches of deviations to your main strategy are important. So let's go into this little example, and then I'll show you 3 strategies that are built with the principles that I've talked about. But first, let's talk about this counter strategy example. So say for instance, you lose to griffins a lot as an orc. So what are the building blocks of a human opponent going for griffins? Now keep in mind that all of this is understandable within the framework of your own game understanding. And your game understanding is going to deviate from another player or from me. And it's not important for you to be correct in answering all the research questions. It's mostly important to just be engaged in the process of asking yourself questions and then coming up with answers. The way I always like to see it, it's much better to be wrong in strategy games, as a lot of it is trial and error. But at least if you're wrong and you had a reason and a plan, then you can evaluate and feedback the approach and its effectiveness. If you don't have a plan and you just sat down at the PC and you press play game, and that's when you start thinking and you don't really have any strategy or plan, well, that's where you get to the kind of average mediocrity and the lack of satisfaction in seeing a plan come to fruition. Which is, by the way, it's fine if you want to play games like that, but you're here maybe, if you're still in the video, because you want to learn how to create strategies. So that happens way before you hit play game the first time. So say for instance, you lose a lot to griffins and you ask yourself, what are the building blocks of griffins? Well, here's what I know about griffins. Griffins are expensive and they're tier 3, so they need a lot of money. So the first sign that someone might be going Griffins is that they are moving to secure an expansion, a second base. That's the first sign, but it is far from conclusive. There will always be many signs leading up to a conclusion, and it gets more and more sure the more clues you get. It's kind of like a game of detective. What's the second sign? When they get to tier 2, they immediately click up to go to tier 3. If they wanted to make a tier 2 army, they would probably stay there. So the fact that they're going to tier 3 means they're getting a tier 3 army, which really is only knights and griffins. So it's one of those two. So now we need to see, are they adding a barracks or are they adding a griffin aviary? We see them build a blacksmith. That's sign number 3. But after they build a blacksmith, we don't see the creation of a workshop. Blacksmith is a prerequisite to workshop. So someone that wants a workshop would build a blacksmith. So we see the blacksmith, but we don't see the workshop. That's a sign it might be for something else. Now, I happen to know that griffins use upgrades a lot, armor upgrades, in order to protect against Batrider explosions. So if I see the light up in the blacksmith, that's sign number 3 that they might be going for griffins. Sign number 4 actually. Sign number 3 is the fact that they have blacksmith, but they're not using it to create a workshop or rifleman. Sign number 5 is seeing one or even more griffin aviaries. If we see any griffin aviaries, it either means griffins or dragonhawk. It could also mean a fake griffin aviary and they're not looking to use it at all. But this is generally inefficient in Warcraft 3 and impossible. It does happen in StarCraft 2, fake out buildings in order to make an opponent overreact in the wrong direction, but Warcraft 3 is not volatile enough to make such inefficient investments actually worth the mind game. So trust me, if you see an aviary, they're looking to use it. So it's either dragonhawks or griffins. But dragonhawks can come out at tier 2 and aviaries can be built at tier 2. So if they're still building a castle and they have an aviary but it's not lighting up in production, then that's almost sure that it's going to be griffins. The next tell is seeing multiple aviaries, which shows a really big dedication towards it. And the final tell, while it's very obvious, it's still important, you actually see griffins coming out of the aviary or the griffins are flying on the map. That's a very surefire sign that they're going griffins. So all of these 6 steps, these 6 signs, are identifying that an opponent is going griffins. And now you know what to scout for. So if you're an orc that has a base plan of going Taurens, then you build scouting components that identify whether an opponent is going for griffins, which is they're expanding, they made a blacksmith, they went straight to tier 3, they made aviaries, they made griffins, and they didn't make rifles or a workshop. Alright, now we're quite clear that he's going griffins and we can start our counter response. So if I asked you outside of a game, what would you do against griffins, and you don't have an answer, then for sure you're not going to know what to do during the game when you're being stressed by the APM and the management and the pressure of the situation when you're already mid-game. So we want to figure these things out before and after games, not during games. There's not that much time for high quality, patient, reasonable thinking during an RTS game against another player. So that's why I always say, first figure out your optimal map hack response. If someone is going mass griffins, what are you doing? My answer, mass Batriders. Now I say, where are the signs for that he's going to go for griffins? Identify all the signs, such as you identify them, right? I know my signs, but maybe you had a different routine. Maybe your only sign was I see aviary. And then scout for the timing that those things generally happen. And now you know when to build your bestiaries. Because the unprepared commander starts making his bestiaries once he sees griffins. But the prepared commander sees all the signs and prepares his bestiaries in advance. Sun Tzu's Art of War. If you know others and you know yourself, you will not be imperiled in 100 battles. If you do not know others but you know yourself, you win one and you lose one. If you do not know others and do not know yourself, you will be imperiled in every single battle. This is why we have our main skeleton, which is the knowing of ourselves, our main strategy. We scout an opponent, therefore we know him, and then need not fear the outcome of 1,000 battles. Alright, let's do a little exercise where we create 3 strategies based on core principles and trying to chase down certain advantages, one of the 8 advantages that I mentioned earlier on. Say for instance, we want to build a strategy around movement speed, 0.6, because we think movement speed is fun. we then look at some of the faster and more maneuverable units that we can have in the race of our choosing. Say for instance we're undead, well, we're going to look at the movement speed for all the units, and it turns out that shades, ghouls and gargoyles are the fastest. So maybe we'll build a strategy with those three. Sounds fun. So is there another way we can be even faster? Yes. Death Knight has an aura called Unholy Aura, which gives movement speed to the entire army. So we're going to go with Death Knight first, go with some ghouls, and then head over to tier 2 and start making some gargoyles. Because we're very fast, we can choose which fights to take, and so we can make decisions about hitting an opponent's base and then running like a thief in the night. And we're going to avoid fights that are bad for us, but we can aggressively chase down fights that are good for us. And so we'll use a shade to know where they are, see what they're doing, see when they're exposed, see when they're weak, when their army is hurt from creeping, and then we can strike. And if they're not weak and they're ready, then we simply don't take a fight. We'll fortify our main base and we'll keep ourselves strong by not spreading too thin and making an expansion. And we will leverage the bonus advantage of 50 population so that we get a lot of gold, and we'll just constantly hit and kill peasants over and over. Our win condition with our movement speed is also an economic win condition, which naturally follows forth from the capabilities that our higher movement speed army gives. Instead of making an expansion and getting more gold from that, we aim to instead endeavor to get a 1 versus 0 base situation, if you will. We are mining from our one base and we're killing their peasants to the degree that they're barely mining from their single base. So now we can start asking ourselves a series of questions. There are many different decisions you can make in a game of Warcraft 3, and sometimes because we see so many trees, we lose sight of the forest. In this case, we can ask ourselves some questions, and because we have our win condition and our method kind of in mind, we can answer them with a greater level of confidence than we would be able to if we just sit down and say, I don't know if I should get upgrades. I don't know if I should take this fight. Should I creep or should I attack? Everything becomes clearer because we have put a vision, a purpose in our mind. So, for example, should we get any upgrades? And if we do, which ones? From the blacksmith or the graveyard in this case. What is better, armor or attack upgrades? Well, attack upgrades is better because we are basically killing peasants and buildings all the time and we're avoiding direct confrontation. We are expecting to hit, but not be hit. So attack upgrades is better, logically, right? So we'll get 1 attack upgrade for ghouls and 2 attack upgrades for gargoyles, for instance. So what should our second hero be? Again, we've got so many choices. 8 tavern heroes and 3 altar heroes. That's 11 choices. How to make sense of it? Well, again, we are not really fighting, so we don't need something that kills heroes very well. We're looking to kill peasants or wisps. So Dreadlord second with Carrion Swarm could be really good for that, or maybe Lich with Frost Nova to kill workers. Second hero could also be someone that kills buildings very well, like a Pandaren Brewmaster or a Goblin Tinker. They have the Fire Breath and the Factory that can deal good damage to buildings, so that could be a choice as well. Perfect. So now, do we need an expansion? No, we don't, because it actually makes it harder for us to have an impervious fortified base, and it would force us on the defensive to defend the fledgling expansion, and this would force engagements onto us, whereas we're actually trying to avoid engagements because we have this fragile but fast-moving army. And we don't want him to run into our expansion and kill us before we can make use of it, because then we'll be forced to sacrifice our ghouls to protect it. Now we don't have any ghouls to do the rest of our plan anymore. Do we need higher level heroes? Well, not really, right? Like, even if we are level 4 Death Knight and he's level 4 Demon Panda on both, essentially he's got double the XP I have. That could still be fine if I make sure that he loses his gold mine and all of his wisps, and now he's got a 40 population army, and I have saved up 3,000 gold on one base, and now I can make 5 frost worms because of all the hit and run I've been doing with my mobility advantage. Even those heroes will not be able to stand against what I have. So what I don't have to do is to do like extensive creeping and creep the whole map and creep as much as I can. That's not part of what I'm doing, right? I'm using movement speed, not creeping speed, not hero level advantage. I'm not leveraging heroes to win battles. I'm here to kill peasants. And now you can see how this focus of having this one win condition in mind actually answers all the other questions along the way and makes things a lot clearer. So now we have our win condition, 1 versus 0 base, and everything else will flow forth from that. Second situation. Let's say, for instance, we want to embrace a hero killing strategy. So we'll be making our heroes stronger than theirs, and then we're gonna try to really kill heroes all the time. We may lose some army while we're focusing heroes, so his army is actually gonna be bigger, which means we're not seeking army size or quality advantage, at least initially. It's not the goal. Our goal is to kill his heroes. So we need burst damage, we need direct damage, we need lockdown. All right, let's begin. So let's say we're Orc. We'll open up with the Blade Master. So what do we need? We need lots of damage. Blade Master is a big damage dealer. So initially, we know that we must build some kind of creeping plan. If we do non-stop harass and our hero is level 1, but we did a lot of economic damage, that doesn't really serve the purpose of having a hero killing strategy, because now my blade doesn't have damage. So I have to start by creeping and finding some good damage items. Creeping is best done with headhunters and mirror image instead of with windwalk and grunts. Windwalk grunts is good at reconnaissance and disruption, whereas mirror image and headhunters is good at creeping faster. So we will get more levels and more items, and this will help our tankiness on the blade and our damage output. Then we'll go with bestiaries so that we can get some raiders and get some lockdown. Should we go for another unit like Witch Doctor, Shaman, like Kodo? Well, not really. Those have like map control purposes. Kodo eats units. Doctors allow me to know where an opponent is. Torrents are like, they come out too late and they specialize at splash damage. So because we decided we're going to go for a hero killing strategy, Raiders, Wyverns and Headhunters are going to be the best. Two of those focus fire and do damage from afar, and Raiders provide the lockdown and the surround that we'll also be needing. We'll go for Shadow second so we can hex and prevent someone from using an invulnerability potion or a town portal scroll, and we can use heal to keep the blade and raiders alive. So now we get to the series of questions, or maybe we do the questions first and then we do the conclusion, which I just gave you. Do we need an expansion? No, we don't need an expansion. We are here to kill his heroes, and after we do that, it will unlock other types of advantages to us. By making an expansion, we're investing money that could have been spent instead buying extra circlets or getting more burst damage more quickly on the field. So it actually slows us down, and again, it forces us to defend it and slow down other types of advantages. Instead of creeping to find more items on our blade, we'll be defending our expansion, and that is counterproductive to the primary purpose of getting items on our blade. Do we need an item advantage? Yes. Do we need an army size advantage? Not necessarily. While it does matter to a great degree in some way, we could potentially kill heroes when we're on 50 pop and they're on 70 pop. We just need to scout and then see when his hero goes out of position, and then if it does, we quickly strike and we kill it. Either we kill it or he town portals out, which will buy us time. And in doing so, by using a hero killing strategy, it can actually lead to us gaining gold advantage, because we could stay on 50 pop, as it only needs a small commando-sized army to take down heroes, whereas his 70 pop army may easily win a fight, but he may not have the tools to focus one of our heroes to the same degree. Do we need a movement speed advantage? Ideally, yes. So we either debuff his movement with Ensnare, or like we use speed scroll or something, but like it's obviously useful to have movement speed advantage with our unit choice, which makes Headhunters a little worse and Raider Wyvern a little better, because that allows us to quickly pounce on him and his hero. And we probably want to have a fortified base as well, so that we don't die to counterattacks, which will allow us the opportune time to catch his hero. We can also base trade and then force him to split his army, which will again lead to hero killing opportunities. And then do we need upgrades? Well, if we're going to get upgrades, it's going to be attack upgrades, right? Either Raider attack upgrade or Headhunter attack upgrade. So you see that I have before in strategy games been in situations where my head is like a blur and I don't know how to make improvements anymore. And my main suggestion to you is to not be too concerned with making a good strategy immediately, but making any strategy. And I'm actually showing to you and to myself how easy it is. All you need to do is to choose one type of advantage that's achievable in the game, and then to just start building reasons around it. And that will lead you to a very useful and scientific trial and error, where you can measure whether you are achieving the purposes that you're looking to achieve. In the final example, we're looking to leverage a hero strength advantage. Say for instance you're Night Elf. What are the strongest heroes that you can have, especially as you go into the mid and late game, when given a chance to get to something like level 5 and 5? Well, that could be something like Demon Hunter first and then Pandaren Brewmaster second. you would put an Orb of Venom on your Demon Hunter and some statistic items like attribute items, agility, strength. You'll put a Staff of Preservation, and then you'll put a Staff of Teleportation on the Panda with some stat items or mana or something. And both of them being in level 5 could defeat nearly any army almost by themselves. So now we understand our goal and our win condition is to destroy entire armies with a high level Demon and Panda. How do we go about getting there? So we have an ambitious and long-term scaling plan, and we want to get our heroes to the late game, to the end game. So are we going to play safely generally, aggressively, or greedily? Well, the Demon Panda themselves to level 5 is already a very ambitious and greedy plan. So we should make most of the rest of our strategy, including our build order, unit count, unit progression, we should make all that a lot safer. Because double greed generally dies. For instance, if we're going to go one archer straight to tier 3 and then straight to Druids of the Claw with Demon Panda, that would be really greedy and you would probably die. And there's no need to be that greedy because your greed is already encapsulated in your hero choice. You're making Demon Panda your win condition. The opposite of it would be if you go, for instance, Keeper into Beastmaster. Keeper and Beastmaster both have summons, so they offer a lot of early game units. So when you have Keeper and Beast, you're actually creating a lot of tempo, but you're not creating a lot of scaling into the late game. These heroes themselves are not win condition. Instead, they are creating a fertile ground for you to seek another win condition, such as mass fast Druids of the Claws, mass fast Druids of the Talon, or a lot of Chimeras early, for instance, or perhaps an expansion so that you can make more units than an opponent. So keep in mind when you're making scaling, ambitious hero choices that you make the rest of your strategy to be a lot more safe. So greedy, aggressive, or safe. If we were aggressive, we're rushing with Panda level 1, it kind of sucks. He doesn't have enough power yet. And if we're playing greedy, we die. So we play it safely. So how do we play safely? We're not going to skip basic units first of all. We're going to get a bunch of archers. But how many archers should we get? How do we make our build order and the ideal unit count? You'll find that actually too much and too little is both bad. One archer into tier 3 means you don't have enough defenses against a rush. But if you go for 12 archers into tier 3, then you'll actually become so obsolete in the mid game or the later mid game that you have too much money spent, too much population spent into units that do not actually do enough anymore against midway advanced units of an opponent. So you want neither too many nor too few, which again is different when you play Keeper Beast. If you were to go for Keeper Beastmaster, you could make 8 or 10 archers and then do an attack and just win off the back of it because you have so much tempo. But Demon Panda does not like to do this. Every unit has its own story to tell. So the story of making 10 archers is going for a rush. If you make 10 archers and you don't rush, then it doesn't fit the story. That's not what Demon Hunter Panda want to do. Again, when we get to tier 2, you're going to make a bunch of lures to make dryads and bears, but how many dryads, right? How many dryads should I make? Well, if you went for Demon Keeper or Demon Naga or Keeper Beast or Keeper Naga, you can make as many dryads as you like. And the more you make, the more it tells a story of aggression. Dryads are a cheap, easily pumpable unit that you can get a lot of very early, and they're very good in the early to mid game. And they're good support units in the late game, but you don't want to have like Infinity Dryads in the late game, because they're not that efficient against developed enemy armies. So, do we want 1 Dryad to bears? Probably too greedy. But if we make 12, we have to rush. We're now 60 pop, and we're stuck, and we don't have a growth strategy anymore, and we basically do want to have some money to buy heal pots and mana pots on our Demon and Panda, so that they can be a front line, and that they can be safe and not get picked off early. So, 4 Dryads would probably be a good unit count, 4 to 6 Dryads, and then we gradually get to bears. So you see, everything is very gradual. We're going to get about 5 archers, then we'll get about 4 to 5 dryads, and then we're going to bears. Everything is very smoothed out, where we make a little bit of everything to continue to outpace the threat that an opponent may levy against us. We continue to match the threat, I should say, so that we're not cutting corners, nor are we over-investing in some kind of aggression strategy. We're doing just enough to stay alive so that we can continue to meet the threats that are facing us in our own base. We're not going to go to the enemy base unless we feel really good about it. So by focusing on our goal of Demon Hunter and Panda 5, we can answer each question along the way in accordance to our own current game understanding, of course. So yeah, in summary, when you're playing a strategy game that has multiple win conditions and multiple roads to victory, and you want to create some inspiration for yourself to have more fun with the game or to find new avenues of playing, simply choose a type of victory that you're looking to achieve, be it eco, like economy, defense, offense. Select one of those, visualize the final step of how you're looking to win the game. Either you crush their army, or you crush their heroes, or you crush their base, or maybe you heroically hold off an attack in your own base. Once you have that image imprinted in your mind, you can backwards engineer every subsequent step and come up with a valid build order that fits your purposes, come up with a valid scouting plan, and a plan for adaptations and deviations. Through a series of logical questions to yourself, you can use the map hack technique of the optimal response against things, and then scout for those things on time, and you can create your own oak tree of strategies and adaptations. And when you're finally done, you can hit play game. Good luck.